So I'm here with Chanda Austin. She's an author who resides in Atlanta, Georgia. She is an educator of over 20 years and the mother of one amazing 14-year-old young lady. In her spare time, she enjoys traveling, local eats, and live music. How are you doing today, Chanda?
I am great, Ryan. Thank you for having me on this beautiful Sunday afternoon.
Oh, of course. I was reading your bio and I saw that you grew up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Tuscaloosa. Okay. What was it like growing up there?
I was just telling someone that I don't think you realize what a great childhood you have until you get older. It was a smaller town, but not really. The University of Alabama is there. So if you know anything about football, you know about the University of Alabama. So it was a small town, but everybody took care of each other. I grew up in a community where, if your grades wasn't good, the teachers calling your parents, you had cousins that went before you. So everybody really looked out for each other and took care of each other.
Wow, that's amazing. I think like something and stuff and everything that we've kind of like lost in society where people don't
Absolutely.
really, look out for everybody. It's kind of like, one man for themselves. I saw also that like, growing up, you struggled to learn how to read and you
Yeah.
eventually, how did you overcome that obstacle?
So my mother is an educator, and I grew up in a home of educated people. My parents were both college graduates, and so they really pushed this whole narrative around you're going to be a reader. And so for several summers, I went out to the University of Alabama to a reading lab. And they were just really relentless when it came down to education, making sure that I got what I needed. And that's really how I overcame it. I overcame it by doing it and having a support system that said that I could do it.
And it eventually paid off because you went very far in your academic achievements, a master's of education and stuff. That's a pretty big deal.
It's funny, Ryan, because when I did my master's, I went straight through and to be honest with you, I just wasn't ready for real life. And it was just the easiest thing to do to be able to convince my parents that I just wasn't ready to work. But it paid off. Like it really paid off. Being a first time teacher, being able to kind of choose my space because I did have a master's degree, and my first teaching experience was amazing. I couldn't have asked for a better experience with good people, good community, and a lot of diversity. A lot of diversity. So it really opened up a door that I think otherwise probably wouldn't have happened for me.
Speaking of diversity, that brings me to your book, Qiana's Braids. And one of the things and stuff I've noticed, like a lot of times in the news, you know, uh, black women in particular, a lot of people would say it's just hair, but
Yeah.
you've had like the federal court, it's ruled it's legal for employers to ban dreadlocks before in the past. And then you've had like young girls in middle school, getting suspended for wearing their natural hair. Was like
Yes.
some of these current events like what inspired you to write the book?
So I always tell people in this interview it's a three-part inspiration. One being I have a daughter who's giving me permission to tell the story about how she really struggled with her hair and becoming a teenager and not really knowing what to do. And my own stylist suggested that she get braids, and it literally changed how she looked at herself. It literally changed how we managed her hair. And that was about 2 years ago, and we've been in braids since. And I also wanted to really tell a story of the subculture of beauty salons. There's something magical that happens in a Black beauty salon and a Black barbershop that I don't think happens in other places. Those women are literally a part of my family, and I've been in the same salon for over 20 years. And thirdly, just to share a story about how there's history behind braids. How did we get here? If you, it's a simple Google. When you look at the transatlantic slave movement and how braids were used for our brothers and sisters to be able to escape their masters on plantations. And if you go back to the African origin of braids. There's kinship, there's honor behind braids. So it's just not a protective styling for Black women. And so in my interviews, I also wanted to say people who are non-Black women, you know, stop dehumanizing hair. Black hair is a God-given right for us. And so that's also been a part of my messaging. And as you said, you talked about the Crown Act of 2019, that actually there's some legislation around, you know, policy and what policy should look like for Black men and women. Not only women, but men as well. When you see jobs saying that, you know, you can't wear locks. I don't even like the term dreadlocks because there's nothing dreadful about our hair. And so who makes those policies? Who decides that that's not professional? And so when we start talking about changing the narrative and changing who's sitting at the seats, are we having these courageous, uncomfortable conversations about who makes policy? Typically, it's middle class white men who say, "Well, your natural hair isn't professional." By whose standards? So we really need to look at these things. So I hope when little girls read the book that they have a sense of empowerment, that they have a sense of love and acceptance for who they are, and nobody should say to you, "Well, this is not professional," or "You can't wear this to school." Kids are being suspended for wearing braids or locks to school. So who comes up with those policies? And we need to really revisit those policies.
Most definitely. And I hear the big thing is like, it's empowerment for young girls, the book. Because like, you want them to feel like, very good. I have two daughters myself, and like, you want them to feel good about their hair. Because I think like so many times in society, like a lot of the characters in books are mostly white characters. And
Absolutely.
was it important, like, to put like, as a person of color, to put like a book out there to have like, role models for girls to,
So by trade, Ryan, I'm an educator and I work on the executive leadership side of things. So I said that to say that a lot of times I have the opportunity and privilege to choose literature for schools. And because I work in such a diverse community, a lot of times I'm looking for books of other ethnicities, not necessarily Black children. But even in that space, finding books with our Latin brothers and sisters, finding books with our Asian brothers and sisters, it's difficult. You know, most picture books have uh, animals as characters. So in that space, it was very important to me as I worked with my illustrator that we had pictures of little Black girls that look like little Black girls, that little Black girls can look at and say, "Oh yeah, that little girl looks like me," or "Oh yeah, I remember when I got my hair braided," or "Oh yeah, I remember when I went to the beauty salon and this is how it sounded and this is how it felt." And I was, very intentional with my illustrator, asking him to bring the words to life with the colors, with the pictures, with the facial expressions. I didn't want to see, you know, white kids with brown faces, if that makes sense.
definitely. Talking about the illustrator, like, what was the process like? Was it pretty straightforward of finding an illustrator to, depict Black girls?
So I work with a guy out of Jacksonville, Florida. His name is William Blaylock, and he's an artist. And we had one meeting and we rolled. I mean, it took a while to get the illustrations done because it's like a three-part process that he goes through, and for every process, he's having you to approve it. And it was done, he was like, "You were kind of hard." I was like, "Well, this is, I'm sensitive about my stuff. This is my stuff." So, I wanted, and actually I published a book and put it down and republished it. And we had to go back and do all the pictures over, Ryan. Because from the time that I published it the first time to the time that I was like, let me stop playing with this project and get it done, the process had shifted. And I went back and really spent some time looking at the pictures and said, I don't like this, or let's try this, or And so I actually paid for the process twice, but it was so worth it. It was so worth it.
And it's definitely paying off because I've read like so many amazing reviews. Qiana's braids. Where can people find it online?
Qiana's Braids, QIANASBRAIDS.com, or they can find it on Amazon. So I don't know. It's backwards. Oh no, it's not. So here's the book, and they can find it on Amazon, and they can find it on my webpage.